and South Carolina at noon. And we want to bring in SEC basketball insider, Kentucky Hoops insider, founder of Kentucky Insider, and editor of A Sea of Blue. He is Tristan Pharis on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. I would have to believe that things are going well up there with Big Blue Nation in Bourbon Country with the way that y'all played as of late. Tristan?
Yeah, it got a little testy there late January, early February, but the last week has definitely gave Big Blue Nation some confidence going into March. You pretty much demolish LSU, and then you go and beat a really good offensive Missouri team on the road in a good environment. So pretty good week heading into the postseason.
So are you buying, so it took a while, and that's fine. I mean, you have a first-year coach, and you have the portal, which is, mayhem. And so when you get a new coach and you got to do the whole thing over again, it's like Cal and the Hogs. It took them a little while. And so are you buying totally now, or do you need to see a little bit more? Where are you in this journey?
Now, personally, Mark Pope has definitely exceeded year one expectations for 99% of the Kentucky fan base. Now, there's always the small percentage that does have outlandish expectations. But, I mean, you beat all of your big rivals. You beat Duke. You beat Tennessee. You swept Tennessee, not just beat them. You beat Louisville. So you beat everybody that you really, really wanted to beat in your first season. And then you go out and you get 8 top 15 wins, the most in program history, tied for the most in NCAA history. So now there are some lacking losses there, some baffling ones to Ohio State, and Georgia, Ole Miss blowout. So there's some baffling losses in there, but for the most part, it's good. Now, personally, the way I look at it is year one definitely a success. Now you measure what happened in the postseason, but the regular season has definitely been a success. I think the real test for Pope comes next year, because that'll be really the first roster in terms of he's had a year to build it. So he went out and got some freshmen and see how he can adapt those into his offensive system, which is really intricate. And you'll hear a lot of coaches say that. But then he'll also have a year under his belt to look what I did with this group of transfers that I had put together in just a few weeks, and try to go get some really top names this season.
Okay. Tristan Pharis, Big Blue Nation insider, and they're all going crazy. They'll take over Nashville. I mean, I can remember that as a kid, watching Big Blue Nation take over SEC basketball tournaments, and they'll do it this weekend. But it's interesting you say that. So for 99% of your fan base, Mark Pope, first-year head coach for Kentucky, has exceeded your fan base's expectations. However, and you were kind of pointing towards next year. However, you've got a team that could end up in the Final Four, don't you?
I feel like, don't get me wrong, they definitely could. That they've shown that they have the ability to exceed the expectations. They're really resilient. When you count them out, that's when they play their best. But I think without Jackson Robinson, now I know several players have stepped up. The freshmen have started to play better, but to assume or kind of expect the Final Four would be a little outlandish, I think. But I think a Sweet 16 is probably where most people feel like is the expectation is this year, which I think just because they've played so well, they've kind of played themselves into those raised expectations. But yeah, March is the test. So if you go out and lose round one, this season's been a failure. If you make it to the second round, I think most people will be very happy with that. I think even if you get a win, which is something Kentucky's not had in a couple of years, a lot of postseason success. Even if you just get a win, I think most people will be happy.
Does it make you mad that Cal and the Hogs look like they've turned it around, and if they win on Wednesday, they're in, or it looks like they're in?
I'm not one of those that really left with a hatred of Cal. I'll always respect Cal for what he did at Kentucky on and off the court. He raised millions of dollars, impacted the community, and he brought us a national championship. Yeah, have the last few years sucked for sure. And I think it was just kind of a mutual, everybody got better from it. He kind of got red of the stress, and you kind of see him and a couple guys he took with him flourishing here at the end of this season. And then Kentucky were still a 3 seed. It worked out for both sides. But February 1st sucked for sure, and hopefully we don't have that circus.
Oh, what was that like? Tell me what that was like on the boards and on Sports Talk Radio. When y'all were up in the first half by, I think, double digits, Tristan. And then Cal and the Hogs beat y'all in Lexington. Did you think that night, did you think, oh no, Mark Pope could lose control of this? I mean, what was your reaction? And what was the fan base's reaction the next 48 hours when y'all lost to Cal and the Hogs?
Yeah, I don't think there was a lot of big picture worry. I think it was just in the moment what that meant. Now, if you look from where I looked at it, that game meant more to anybody else on the floor than Cal and the 3 players that left Kentucky. Those 4 guys, it meant more to anyone else, just because they know what it was like to be here at Kentucky. They know what it was like to leave, and they've kind of seen the backlash since they've left. And now I think a lot of that backlash is from the minority of the fan base, but they still felt it. So those guys came in motivated, and they played like it. But yeah, big picture wise, there wasn't a lot of worry. It was just like, out of all the games, like, you lost to the guy that has kind of given Kentucky some heartache the last few years. Out of all the games you had to lose, at home especially, that was one that a lot of people didn't want to. But I think the way they rattled off the next few weeks, obviously I think they bounced back and beat Tennessee 10 days later. That kind of helped ease the pain. So just kind of they played their way back out of it. I don't think many people talk about it much anymore just because they don't want to. But yeah, definitely a circus pregame, a circus of a pregame atmosphere, and a pretty bad loss, especially what I think at that time they'd only won 1 or 2 games in the SEC.
Right.
But I think them also playing better has helped ease that as well, because they're going to end up a tournament team most likely.
Kentucky Wildcat insider Tristan Pharis hanging out with us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mark Pope and the Cats have turned this thing around, and they could be a dangerous, dangerous draw in March Madness. And as Tristan said, Pope was able – what does that say about Mark Pope, that he was able to keep everything together? Because that could have derailed your season after Cal and the Hogs, who were not playing well, come in and beat you. What does that say about Mark Pope, your new coach for the Kentucky Wildcats?
I think Mark Pope, what I like about him, he's very positive. So even now, I think people have seen it when Kentucky played Auburn a few weeks ago, kind of like the pregame speech. They kind of compared Mark Pope, and there was just a few claps, and they compared it to Bruce Pearl, who had players jumping on him right before the game. It's just kind of a different level of intensity. Now, that's not to say Mark Pope doesn't get intense. He kind of picks and chooses his moments. But throughout both really high times, really low times, he's always positive. Before or after losses, or before or after games, after losses, that positivity never wavers. And I think his team feels that. So even when they lose to Ole Miss by 20 points and never look competitive, or even when they lose to Auburn the weekend before last and looking competitive, then when they lose that Arkansas game, they always find a way to bounce back, just because that positivity never wavers. And I think that's a big part of his coaching style, and his players really seem to respond to it really well.
Okay. Does it bother you when Cal goes to NBA games and takes pictures with Kentucky players?
Personally, no. Most of those guys, with the exception of a few, have pledged their allegiance to Kentucky. They went to school at Kentucky. There are a couple Cal guys. The Reed Shepherd controversy a few weeks ago was something, but those guys are.
Oh, what happened with that? I didn't see it. Talk to me.
Oh, so Reed Shepherd, he had a Arkansas shirt with Kentucky shorts on before the Arkansas-Kentucky game.
Oh, dude, you can't do that?
Yeah. I don't know who was advising him on that.
He misread the room, especially with his father playing at UK too. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. And I think what a lot of people liked is, obviously Arkansas won that game, but what a lot of people didn't like is it was the Arkansas top. So Arkansas was able to tweet Arkansas on top after that game, which made it even worse. So even if he would have just kind of wore the Kentucky shirt, Arkansas shorts, I don't think the lash back would have been as bad. But yeah, you can't. It wasn't just his dad played at Kentucky; he was roommates with Mark Pope at Kentucky. So it kind of felt like a backslap to Kentucky.
Wow.
Yeah, it
Man.
was. It was very intense for a few days. I have kind of what he did for Kentucky last year was I'm appeased. I'm okay with it. But a lot of people aren't, and they're still pretty hurt by it.
Damn. Okay, I did not, dude. You gotta read the room better than that. He's a fantastic player. He broke our heart last year with that shot in the hump when he and Hubbard went on that, one-on-one against each other the last few minutes of the game as true freshmen. Some of the best basketball I've ever seen in my life from 18 or 19-year-olds. But dude, you can't wear Arkansas. You can't wear Arkansas swag, Tristan. I mean, you can't.
Nope.
Your family bleeds blue. I mean,
yeah, I get it for a lot of those players, but to be born and raised in Kentucky, your mom and dad played at Kentucky, your dad was roommates with the current coach. It's just, not great advice to him.
I would have loved to have been able to see the text exchange, after the game. But man, Cal's got he's like he hypnotizes people. He's got such a magnetic personality that, and he's the best salesman in the history of college basketball and brand builder, individually. In of course, Kentucky's brand was already built, but then Cal had his own brand, which is incredible that he was actually able to get out of that shadow. That's how big he is. All right. Who do you think the best, Auburn's been kind of start to finish, but Florida's playing out of their minds. Which team do you like the best right now in the SEC?
It's really hard to pick against Auburn just because they've lost 3 games. or I think it was 3 games, maybe 4, and they've all been to top 5, top 10 teams. So the tear they've been on this year has been crazy, but at the same time, that's a lot of those players were on the same team last year. They got upset in the tournament. So there's some kind of, are they built to make a run? Because there's always a 1 seed that gets upset early. But I really like you alluded to Florida. I really like Florida. I think 1 through 7 or 8, they just brought an all SEC center back, which is nice to add at the end of the season for depth purposes. But I really like Florida. And then Alabama always has one of the best offenses. It just comes down to, can they play defense consistently for a stretch of games here down late. So, but just the strength of the SEC is crazy. I think if you looked at the latest bracketology, they have 6 or 7 teams in the top 16. So I think it's just the SEC hopefully can go pretty far in March and kind of stretch their muscles a little bit more.
All right. Who are you going to go down to Nashville, or are you going to watch it on TV?
I'm going down to Nashville. I'm glad we at least didn't have to play on Wednesday night. I'm hoping for chaos on Wednesday night. I'm just glad Kentucky's not a part of it.
All right. So Kentucky pulls the winner of Oklahoma and Georgia. And God knows
Correct.
What time that game will tip off. It's going to be late.
That's the only thing about Kentucky's draw I do not like, because the whole time they'll have the late game.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the Thursday night, I think it's scheduled for 9:30 Central or 8:30 Central. So I'm sure we'll be playing at 9:30 Central.
That's right, man. That game's going to be now. TV loves y'all late in the night. I think late in the evening, but because y'all are the biggest draw still. I tell you what, man. I still think Bama is filthy, and just Missouri's one that's out there too. It's just so many good teams. Damn, I don't know what.
I mean, you got teams like Oklahoma and Georgia that have top 10, top 15 picks, and they're still trying to fight their way comfortably into the tournament.
I know. And Texas has a top 8 lottery pick, and
it's nothing like I've ever seen in the SEC.
No. All right, buddy. Well, look, man, we're going to do this again during March Madness, and we appreciate you, Tristan. Thanks, dude. Have fun in Nashville.
Sounds good, Bo. I appreciate you having me on. See you guys.
Tristan Pharis, Big Blue Nation insider. Mark Pope gets embarrassed at home by Cal and the Hogs and then turns it around. And that could have been a moment where things start to unravel. Right? And
should have.
Instead, they, Ole Miss had embarrassed them at home at Ole Miss.
Right.
And Cal and the Hogs come in. They hadn't gotten rolling yet. And he makes a good point. The 3 transfers wanted it. Cal wanted it like crazy. But Arkansas they're down early. And then they come storming back and win. And I don't know what he did, but give Pope credit, getting his team back together the next day, getting in, explaining to him, hey, here's what we did wrong. Here's what we can do. Boom, we got to keep rolling. And I do like the positivity.
Yeah.
I sometimes think that Jans suffocates the moment too much. And Chris is very, very talented. But, and look, he said some things about this team that were unreal. I mean, you could tell how emotional he was last week when they lost to Texas. And knowing that, golly, how many games has Cam Matthews been in Starkville? But I think it's hard to not be who you are, but I don't know. We'll see. How many days off? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? A lot of Wednesday. But everybody's got the same turnaround. Just depends on when you're playing in the tournament. LSU's not a gimme. Y'all saw Mississippi State pulled away and beat them by double digits at home. And you saw that Ole Miss was down by like 22 to them and had to hit a buzzer beater to beat them in Baton Rouge. So they've proven at times that they could play. And it's just not. They've got some players. They're not a great team by any stretch, but they've got some dudes. They trip over dudes in every sport.
Right.
Even when football, basketball, baseball, even when they're down, whatever down is. Well, they've been down in football, obviously, and they're down in basketball this year. We'll see. I don't want to sound like I'm just totally down on the Mississippi State basketball team. I'm not.
Well,
but because they've done some good things, and again, they've won these road games that are at home. It was their problem.
Right.
I mean, they went to Ole Miss, to Georgia, to Vanderbilt. They're all going to the tournament. They went to Memphis. Memphis is going to the tournament. They went out to Arizona and got a good win. But I'm looking here at their, by the metrics, according to Ken Palm, their offense is top 50 in the nation. Their defense falls outside the top 150.
That is what?
And losing DJ Jeffries and Tolu Smith, and again, DJ 6'7" on the perimeter, either the best or top 5 perimeter defender in the country last year. And Tolu was a top 5 big man on defense. I mean, there's no doubt about that. What that allowed Jans to do with the other guys that were playing at that time, whoever was playing, you could cheat on the perimeter.
Yeah.
You could, because you knew if the guy backdoored you, who was there? Tolu. At almost 7 feet.
Yeah.
And then you put DJ on their best shooter. You did. And it just, you're a different team. And Melendez and Harris are nice players. And then the others are role players in Nwoko and Jones. Murphy, you'll have to bid your tail off on him. But Keyshawn Murphy is good. And he could be a stud next year because he finally played a whole year this year for the first time in years. And he's been able to drop 18 and 19 and 20 at times. He's got that skill set that you want. He can play the mid-range game, and he can play at the rim. Gains 10 pounds, and you bring Hub back, you got something. But you got to go get a shot maker, a point guard, and a big man. So you do not have a big man. Actually, LSU's got some length, so that's something to keep an eye on Wednesday at 6:00 when you're having a cold beer or a lemonade, as far as what that looks like. Now, they may have a chip on their shoulder now that they went back-to-back games. Because don't get me wrong, you got some winners on this team. Hub, Cam, those guys have won games and been to tournaments and stuff like that. So I'm not ready to count them out, but by any stretch. But man, outside the top 150 in the country in defense and 332nd in perimeter defense, it's not a recipe for success. You got to find something. I can tell Kugel has played better. See, like you've lost this past week. Of course, both games you could have won. One
Right.
win in overtime against Texas. Arkansas obviously hit a free throw with 11 seconds left. So I do the Kugel thing. He disappeared for a long stretch. He is playing better, and it looks like they've just told him you're playing.
Yeah.
You did this whole thing where you disappeared for 4 weeks, and that blank is over. I still think he's the X factor. I've talked about Brakefield and Kugel, but you don't ever know which Kugel is going to show up, or Brakefield, but definitely Kugel. And you took a chance on Clary, and it absolutely blew up in your face.
Yeah.
He never played basically. So that's on the staff. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're brought to you by RPT and Rick's Pro Truck. Have you got a Jeep or a truck or an SUV? Whether it's spraying bed liners or lift kits or tires and wheels, Weather Tech floor guards, Rick's Pro Truck, 3 locations. RPT Trucks live here. Hour number 3 coming up.